Hello everyone and welcome back to the Dark Duo. I am Kosette.
And I am Ty.
Alright guys, thank you so much for all the support that we've gotten so far. This is something that I've talked to Ty about for over a year and worked on for quite a few months, so I'm happy to have you back for another episode. Any updates for the week, Ty?
No, I can't think of anything off the top of my head. It was a good week.
Okay, well, don't forget to follow the Instagram at Dark Duo Podcast for case visuals, and then follow wherever you listen. Today we'll be covering our last case from the fairy tale murders, and then next week we will have a new theme for the month of April. We have decided to do themes for each month so that we can tell similar stories throughout that month and then cover different areas of true crime. We will be posting on Saturday on the Instagram the new theme for April, so make sure to keep checking that and stay up to date. And if you don't check the Insta or you don't have Instagram, then that's okay. We'll also announce it on the podcast next week. But I'm super excited for next month's, and I'm pretty sure Ty is too.
Oh yeah, I'm very excited.
All right, let's get back to this week. This week's case is the closeout of our fairy tale murders, and it's all about American serial killer named the Grim Sleeper. Have you heard of that one, Ty?
I have not. I've heard of the Grim Reaper, but I haven't heard of the Grim Sleeper.
Okay, yes.
This is news.
We've all heard the Grim Reaper, right?
Yeah.
He's in lots of movies. There's also stories about it, all that good stuff. This is a character that's known for death. And why would we have a serial killer named after this?
I don't know. Probably because he was trying to follow the idea of the Grim Reaper, maybe.
Okay, yeah. All right, well, imagine this. There's a prolific killer in the area, and he kills at least 10 people in the 1980s. Then he suddenly goes dormant for 14 years. Did he move? Did he just no longer have the urge to kill? What happened to him? Then he also attempts to murder again in 2007. This deemed him the nickname the Grim Sleeper because he killed and then he slept for almost 14 years before he decided to try to kill again. Well, let's jump in, shall we?
Absolutely, let's go.
All right, let's start with our sources. I used a lot of sources for this just because there wasn't like one big long story, so I had to kind of connect quite a few sources together. But yeah, there's a lot. I used rollingstones.com, latimes.com, oxygen.com, blurredbylines.com, da.lacounty.com, cnn.com, starnewsonline.com, nbclosangeles.com, ladailymirror.com, seattletimes.com, anetv.com, npr.org, courthousenews.com, cdcr.ca.gov, abc7.com, dailyjeff.com, and thedailynews.com. Trigger warnings for this episode. We will be discussing murder, rape, and sexual violence as always. We will not get into too much detail though, so just please listen with care. Also, we're going to get into his background. We're not trying to give him any recognition for what he did. I don't believe that he deserves any recognition for what he did, but we're also not going to try to make him the main focus because there's so many victims in this case that we want to cover the victims and not him because he's not the one that deserves recognition.
Absolutely.
We also have to cover this entire story to understand like all of everything that happened. We're going to give most of our recognition to our victims rather than him. Lonnie David Franklin Jr. was born in 1952 in Los Angeles. He lived in the LA Black community, and he lived in the narrow streets of the South LA that had lines of well-kept homes, maintained yards. In the 1980s, the place he lived had started to escalate in gang activity and drug issues. These issues also created murder rates to climb. This made Franklin's home the perfect place to hide in plain sight. Franklin worked as a local sanitation worker and as a mechanic who was willing to help those in need. He also always had spare parts in his house, and he was willing to sell cheap to people. He had a window box in his front home full of leafy plants, and he would wash dishes with his wife. His marriage was not the strongest, though. They were kind of in an on-again, off-again situationship, but he had grown kids that he had taught how to drive. He taught them how to fix their cars. Everyone thought he was just like your typical dad.
Yeah.
He also even took care of his mother-in-law and would even take her to the doctors when she needed to go and had appointments.
Sounds like a good guy. I mean, just worked and took care of his kids and then also took care of his mother-in-law.
Yeah, you'd think, but he's not.
Yeah. He was good at masking it.
Yes, yeah, he was a good masker. Not an actually good person. Everyone thought that Franklin was a regular guy with just wife and kids. He even worked as a garage assistant at the LAPD's 77th Street Division Station.
Okay.
So he literally worked for the police department.
Yeah.
He had gotten injured in the job, though, so he received disability checks. However, no one would suspect that anything was wrong. Sure, everyone knew that he had some issues with some encounters with women. He'd be overly flirty, and then he'd flip to hostile with them, but everyone just thought that was just Lonnie. He was quick to help neighbors. He was a good neighbor, would help people whenever they needed it. He'd give them parts for cheap. But a monster can hide in plain sight. Franklin did not have the cleanest record. In 1974, Franklin was a private in the U.S. Army and was stationed in Stuttgart, Germany. 2 men and Franklin kidnapped and raped a 17-year-old girl. Not only did this tragedy happen, but these soldiers also took photos of the attack. This is something that Franklin would continue to repeat when he started to kill in the 1980s. The 3 Army men were arrested and charged with 2 counts of theft, an account of misdemeanor assault, and 1 account of battery. Franklin was then sentenced to 3 years in prison. He wouldn't serve his 3 years. He would serve less than 1 year, which wasn't even half his sentence. He then received a general discharge from the Army, as he should. Guess what happened to the other 2 men who were involved?
They probably served their sentence.
Yeah, they served their 3 years, but Lonnie got out in less than 1 year.
And do you know why? Like, was it on good behavior or?
No. I have no idea. So even the LA police detective that was named Darren Dupree, he had told an outlet, we don't know why he got out. The other guys did their whole time, which is mind-blowing that they served and he didn't.
Yeah.
But it's also crazy too. I think that for rape, it's barely a slap on the wrist. 3 years of prison is not even close to the lifetime of trauma that poor girl had to endure and probably still endures to this day.
Absolutely. That's something that's going to affect her for the rest of her life. And not just her life, but the generations after her.
Yeah, I agree.
A slap on the wrist was not. They needed a lot more than that, but I'm not going to go into that.
Yeah, I agree. Justice system sometimes, I don't know. Anyways, so Franklin was able to hide in plain sight because of the high murder count in South LA, and without DNA analysis being a thing yet, it made it nearly impossible to try to identify him. He had a type that he would go after, though, to also is how he got away with it for so many years. So he would pick women who were lost or estranged from their families, and he would go after African American women who were prostitutes or thought were easy targets, which prostitutes are often a target actually for serial killers.
Yeah.
But they usually choose white women. However, Franklin did not go after white women. He chose to go after African Americans, which during this time, other killers would also kill prostitutes and drug addicts. So it was just kind of a mixture of bad things happening all at the same time. These killers were during a time that was called the Black Coalition Fight Back Serial Murders, which the LAPD felt was racially motivated. So they actually had released an order at this time to protect black women in South Central LA, which good on them.
That's amazing.
Yeah. But this did not stop Franklin. So Deborah Jackson was born on March 2nd, 1956 in Connecticut. So we're shifting gears a little bit.
Yeah.
I gave you a little bit of Franklin's backstory, but we're going to go on.
Yep.
She was living with 2 friends. This included Elizabeth and Leo Anderson. The Andersons had taken Deborah in. Deborah was a trained beautician, but she was currently working as a waitress. She had moved in with the Andersons and their 4 kids in 1981. This was not long after, though, that she had been living with her aunt and lost the custody of her children. She lived with her cousins and her aunt, and her cousin was on drugs. So the house ended up getting busted, and CPS took her children. They had deemed that the environment was unfit, and the children were placed in a foster care. She remained in contact with her children, though, and had built a relationship with the foster mom so that she could take them on weekends to salon trips and to get their hair done.
Good on her.
Yeah.
Good on her wanting to still be a part of her kids' lives, even though that.
Yeah, she was a really good mom.
It was a bad situation.
Yeah. So one night, Elizabeth was cooking dinner in the kitchen when Deborah came in and said that she needed to make a quick errand run. She had to go meet with someone to go repay a loan debt that she had. Elizabeth was a little confused. I mean, it was decently late, and she was confused why she had to do it right at this very moment. Elizabeth had asked if she could just wait and pay him in the morning, and then Leo also chimed in and was like, yeah, you can just pay him in the morning, like, it'll be okay. And I just don't think that you should be going out this late, and you should just wait till tomorrow. Deborah said, though, again, that she could not wait and it had to be paid tonight. Leo later stated that this was, like, kind of odd and didn't really make sense, but they eventually let her go. She was determined to leave. So they're like, okay, go pay your debt. We'll see you in a little bit. So Deborah had walked out and Elizabeth followed her. She offered to drive her rather than her having to take the bus, but Deborah declined. Elizabeth then gave her a hug, and Deborah promised that she would be back by 10 p.m. Elizabeth watched her walk down the street until she disappeared. Elizabeth was unsure if she made it to the bus stop, but recalled that a few hours had ticked by without a sign of her.
Do we know when Deborah left?
I could not find that. I want to say it was about 6-ish, 6 or 7.
Later in the evening.
Yeah, but she said she'd be back by 10.
Yeah.
I do know she had said she'd be back by 10.
Yeah.
And was not back
Just
by
left
10.
later in the evening.
Yeah, it was a little bit later.
Yeah, that is odd. I had to go repay a debt that day, that late in the evening.
Yeah, kind of weird.
Yeah.
By midnight, Leo had begun to pace the living room and said she's 2 hours over, and this isn't right. The Andersons knew that Deborah was never late. In fact, she was very timely, and she was never even a second late. Which sounds like me. I get nervous when I'm late.
Mm-hmm.
But she was very timely. So the Andersons then called the police to file a missing persons report. Guess what the police told them?
I don't know.
They said, you have to wait 24 hours before you can make an official report. If I go missing and the police tell you that you have to wait 24 hours, do not let them say that. That's such crap. And some police will say, oh, you have to wait 24 hours before you can file a missing persons report. That's crap. You don't actually have to wait 24 hours. If they say you have to wait 24 hours, you push and you fight that, because that's so not true. And that happens in so many cases, which is so sad, because those first 24 hours are your most critical hours.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, I'm just going to go out and search for you myself.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. But, like, just more police work, more hands-on. Like, those first 24 hours are so critical.
Yeah.
So the fact that they wouldn't let them file that in that first 24 hours is infuriating.
Yeah.
But
no, I agree.
But the Andersons were better, I guess, than we would have been. And the next day, they decided to go back and file the missing persons report, because she still wasn't back and 24 hours had gone by.
Yeah.
Which, 3 days later, they then went home to find a card on their front door from the LAPD's 77th Division Homicide Unit. Does that ring a bell that we talked about?
Yeah.
Okay, yeah.
It really does.
Yeah. So they had asked them to get in touch with them. They then went to the station, where Leo was then taken to a separate room and told that Deborah's body had been found and that they would need to identify her. He was shown her body at the crime scene, just a picture.
Yeah.
And she had been sitting up with a rug on top of her. Deborah was wearing Elizabeth's clothing, which was a pink sweater with pearl buttons and ruffled sleeves and just a collar on it. Leo had said that there was not much bruising on her, but she was just so swollen and I couldn't bear to look at it. She had 3 gunshot wounds to the chest, and when Elizabeth walked in and saw the photo, she said, I just remember feeling so mad. I was hurt and I was upset, and I didn't understand how anyone could ever do that to her, because she was such a kind-hearted person.
Yeah.
So they arranged for the funeral services to be held at the Hard Pike Mortuary, and days later they did a closed casket service. This was then followed by a burial in a nearby cemetery. Deborah had a sister in Inglewood, and her mom lived back east, but they weren't really close with her, so no one attended her funeral, besides Elizabeth and Leo. Elizabeth said that Deborah was a fun person who was always laughing. She had run a beauty shop off Washington and Crenshaw for a little over a year and a half, when the store had changed owners, so that was when she became a waitress at a place called Name of the Game, and she had worked there until she was killed. Just before she was killed, she was in the final stages of getting her children back.
Oh, that's terrible.
She had just been scheduled to sign papers with CPS the day after she had gone missing. So she was so close to getting her kids back. Elizabeth had to tell her children that she had gotten beat up and shot and that they didn't know who killed her. She remained forgotten, and it didn't take long for the case to go cold. The next victim, I could not find as much information on, but we're still going to talk about her. The next victim was Henrietta Wright, and she was a 35-year-old black woman who was found dead with multiple gunshot wounds to her chest. She was found near the 2500 block of West Vernon Avenue in Hyde Park. She originally had no suspects in the murder, and her body had been discarded under an old mattress. They suspected that she'd been killed elsewhere and then dumped and hid under this mattress. The coroner's office had said that she had died because of the multiple gunshot wounds to the chest. Our next victim, Barbara Ware. She was 23 years old when she was found dead on January 10th, 1987. She was found in the 1300 block of East 56th Street in the central Alameda area. A man saw Barbara's body being dumped and had called 911 to report what he saw. The man called and he requested to stay anonymous because he stated he knew too many people. Unsure what that means, but he said that someone threw her out. The only thing it's like hanging out of this, like he threw a gas can on top of her. The only thing you can see is her feet. The 911 caller also reported seeing a full license plate number from the van that the body had been dumped from. So we had quite a bit of information. I found this phone call actually, so I'm going to play it for you because he literally, the way like I was talking is how he was talking in the call. But it's kind of hard to hear with lots of background noise, so I actually found one on the LA Daily Mirror, and it's like was stretched for better comprehension so you can understand it better. And then they also took out majority of the background noise. But you can look it up if you want. I'm also going to play it here. It's still kind of here, but the best one I could find. So we'll pull it up for you real quick.
Yes, I'd like to report a murder, a dead body, or something.
Where at?
The address is 13 1346 East 56th Street in the alley. And the guy that dropped it off was driving a white and blue Dodge van 1TZP746.
Okay, are you saying T like in tongue?
P like in puppy.
T what?
1TZ.
Like a zebra?
P.
Like a tongue?
No, P. Like in pup.
2 T. Like a pup.
Right. 746.
What kind of van was it?
Blue and white.
Did you get a look at him?
I didn't see him.
How long ago did this happen?
It happened about 30 minutes ago, but I'm down the street at the farm, so it happened about 30 minutes ago. And, he threw her out. The only thing that's hanging out of this, he threw a gas tank on top of her, and the only thing you can see out is her feet.
Okay, what's your name?
Huh?
What's your name?
Oh, I was saying the numbers. I know too many people. Okay then, bye-bye.
All right.
Okay, what's your thoughts, Ty?
I don't even know.
It's literally kind of all over the place.
Yeah, it is all over the place. It's very interesting because he gave like a perfect description of the vehicle, the license plate, what he saw, and then I don't know. I want to stay anonymous. I know too much people. Like, I don't know. That's weird.
Yeah, and as soon as I asked who he was, he got off real quick.
Yeah,
he's like, oh no, I know too many people.
Yeah,
all right, bye.
Yeah, just stay. I can't do this anonymous. I know too many people. All right, bye. Yeah, just
he got
way
real
too quick.
Whole thing's kind of weird.
Way too quick. Yeah.
Yeah. Anyways, I thought it was kind of weird, especially how quick he got off the phone. Yeah, whatever.
Did they ever trace the call back to that guy and do an investigation with him or ask him any second questions?
No, they didn't. But they found the car that he had talked about, right?
The van.
Yeah. I mean, maybe it's not super weird because there was so many murder rates. He probably knew people that murdered, or he probably knew something. I don't know. I mean, maybe it's not super weird because it's more innocent than we think it is. Right? Or maybe it's not. I don't know.
They were reading too much into it or thinking too much about it. Yeah.
Yeah. But something that's kind of odd too. So Franklin actually drove a flashy orange Ford Pinto, but the car that he described in the 911 call was a blue and white van. So did maybe Franklin have a different car, or maybe this was someone else that dumped this body? Or did the 911 caller not give accurate details? If you didn't hear the license plate, because it was really hard to hear, the license plate was 1PZP747. The van was then found in a church parking lot that was 4.5 miles away from where Barbara's body had been found. And then that's all we have on that case. After they found the body, they found the van. They didn't really do much in Deborah's case, as the others went cold.
Do you know if Barbara was shot in the chest as well, like the other victims?
Yes, she was.
So there's 3 victims right there. Yeah, each of them go cold, but do they not see the similarity in between all 3 of them?
So they will, but it takes them a while to tie this information together. We'll kind of get into it in later, but we'll keep pressing on. So our next few victims, I also couldn't find a ton of information on, but I'm going to at least bring up their names because I think that they deserve to be talked about, even if information is very minimal. Bernita Sparks was the next victim, and she was 26 years old. She died on April 15th, 1987, and she was found in the 9400 block of Southwestern Avenue in Gramercy Park. Her body was discovered in a trash bin with her shirt and pants unbuttoned and where her one shoe was off. She had also been shot in the chest with a small caliber gun. Mary Lowe was 26 years old and was found on Halloween, so October 31st, 1987. She was also found in the 8900 block of Western Avenue in Gramercy Park. Her body, as the others, was in the alley and behind some shrubs. She had been dumped there and covered up, according to the LAPD. She had also been shot with a small caliber gun in the chest and found with her pants unzipped and her underwear were missing. Latricia Jefferson was 22 years old when she was shot through the heart and had also been found under a mattress in the alley on January 30th, 1988. She had been found with a napkin over her face that read AIDS. Alicia Anderson was only 18 when she was shot and strangled. She had been found on September 11th, 1988, and she was naked under a blue foam mattress in the alley near 43rd Place and Western Avenue in Vermont Square neighborhood of LA. Princess Bertha Muex was even younger at age 15. She was the youngest known victim of the Green Sleeper. She had a shy smile and brilliant dark eyes. The Hawthorne Police Sergeant Chris Cognac had met with her when he was investigating a sex crime in which she was the victim. So he had worked with her to bring her assailant to justice and met with her before the trial at least 6 times. As soon as her assailant's trial had begun, she disappeared and was not seen alive again. Cognac had then spotted an Inglewood police with a flyer asking to identify a victim in the killing. He'd recognized the girl on the flyer as Princess. She had been found strangled and naked, hidden in the bush on Inglewood Alley on March 9th, 2002. So this is where we notice our break start to begin. So our last murder was 1988, and we're now in 2002, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So keep this 14-year gap in your brain. Valerie McCorvey was age 35 when she was found strangled with a ligature and with her pants pulled down at the entrance to an alley. She was found on July 11th, 2003. Janicia Peters was 25 when she was found shot in the back and strangled. She was also found naked with her body in a sealed trash bag in a trash bin on January 1st, 2007. She was also found in the same alley where Bernadetta Sparks was found 20 years earlier. So this is all the known victims that we know from the Grim Sleeper or Franklin.
Yeah.
So we know that his first victim was Deborah Jackson, and this was on August 10th, 1985. Then we noticed a year break from August 1985 to August of 1986, and they were literally almost 365 days apart. It was August 10th, and then it was August 12th when Henrietta Wright was murdered. She was linked to Deborah's murder because all the forensic firearm examination was the same. They noticed it was the same caliber gun and the same bullets that had been shot into both people. Then, by 1987, 7 victims in the areas were all linked together because the bullet wounds were all made by the same gun, which you had talked about earlier.
Yeah.
So by 1987, they were able to link 7 of these victims together because of that.
Okay.
So he also did very similar things to all of them. He would hunt young black women and he would sexually assault them, and then he would shoot or strangle them, and then he'd leave them in the alley, usually partially undressed. He would also use the same gun on all the murders, which is what tied all 10 of these women together. So the question is, how did he get caught, and why did he quit killing for those 14 years? How did he get caught?
I have no idea. I'm waiting.
All right, well, Franklin was trying to be smart, and he knew that if he went after black women who were either estranged from their families or those who were sex workers or those who were on drugs, police would not investigate them. This was because of their past, and it made them a perfect target for him. We also knew that at the time there was so much murder happening that the police just couldn't catch and give adequate time to all these murder cases. Not only was Franklin a serial killer in LA, but during the 1970s to the 1980s, LA was deemed the serial killer capital of America. There was just so much happening that police couldn't cover all their bases. During this time, there was also the Skid Row Stabber, the Sunset Strip Killer, the West Side Rapist, the Toolbox Killer, the Freeway Killer, which he was in LA at this time, but the Freeway Killer went all over, but in this time he was in LA. Then there was also himself, the Grim Sleeper.
It's filled with a bunch of wackos.
Yeah, so during this time there was known to be at least 20 serial killers who were all operating simultaneously in LA. Astounding numbers, 20 years and 20 serial killers at one time.
That's absurd.
So he knew this, and it's how he was able to stay under the radar for so long and not be found.
Yeah.
So what's his fatal flaw then? He seems like he's pretty smart and concealing it pretty good, right?
Yeah.
Well, we all know that a lot of serial killers have somewhat of narcissism, and their confidence is always their fatal flaw. They get too comfortable and they get sloppy. So in 2007, Bratton put together a task force to solve the murders. The evidence that they had was that the killer used a .25 caliber gun, and they did have DNA from the crimes. There just wasn't DNA technology that they could use to test. Yeah. Washington was also able to describe her assailant. We haven't talked about her yet, but she was a surviving victim. Even with all these clues, though, the Attorney General, Jerry Brown, he allowed them to use the DNA probe in California's felony database. This does have some controversy, though, but he allowed it anyways. So in the early 2010s, they used the DNA that was collected at these multiple murder scenes, and the detectives were able to tie Franklin into this DNA system because Franklin's son Christopher had been arrested for felony weapon possession in 2009. So his DNA is in the database. They test the DNA from the murder scenes. They tie this to Christopher, right?
Yeah.
The district attorney has said that this was the first familial DNA searched that was successful in the state of California. But with this evidence, the undercover cops were able to obtain DNA samples from Franklin. They followed him to a birthday party that was at a restaurant in LA, and one of the officers was pretending to be a busboy. He collected Franklin's plate, cup, and the pizza crust, which had been enough DNA that they were able to convict him of the murders.
They're sneaky.
So they were able to test this DNA against the sons, and then this tied them together as family, which led to his arrest in 2010. Franklin's lawyer had cited, though, that this was a reasonable expectation of privacy because they did not obtain it willingly. They did so undercover, and they said that the DNA should be thrown out. However, this claim of the food being private was overruled. Franklin was arrested in 2010. Our next question that we come to that I asked earlier is, why did he quit killing for 14 years?
I don't know. Maybe because of his son. He had a kid at the time. I don't know.
Okay. Well, upon Franklin's arrest in 2010, they searched Franklin's home and they took almost 1,000 photos of women and teenage girls from his house.
That's terrible.
Which, remember, I said earlier that Franklin had either killed or raped them when he took pictures of them. And he had 1,000 pictures at his house. These photos included some women that were nude, some were unconscious, some were bleeding, and some were presumably dead. All of these photos were then entered into the evidence, and after they identified 11 victims from the photos, they began to wonder if there is actually more murders tied to him. At a press conference, the LA police chief, Charlie Beck, had said that we don't know all the victims and we need the public's help. A lot of serial killers will take a break between their killings. I'll go into a little bit of the psychology behind this just because we all know I want to be a psychologist. So for me, it's fascinating, and I also know that a lot of people think it's interesting behind why serial killers do what they do. So we'll do a brief dive before I finish answering this question. I also feel like it's prevalent just because there is psychology behind why they take breaks, why they take trophies, and why they kill again. Franklin's case, his trophies were the photos that he took. I could not find if Franklin was diagnosed with any disorders. However, personal opinion, I think he did. But as we talked about in the beginning, he was fairly nice. But let's take a closer look into his life, shall we? He had plenty of friends, but visitors were rarely allowed to come inside his home. He ruled over his house with an iron fist as well. Years after his convictions, his friends would also talk about odd behaviors that he had. He was often aggressive with women, and often his friends would not see the woman that he was aggressive towards again. They would oftentimes just disappear. He would also tell twisted jokes about how he was an armed and dangerous man. He would never leave his home without a gun. I feel like that thing's not super odd, just because I know quite a few people who do that.
Yeah. Me being one of those people, I like having a gun. I like feeling protected.
Yeah.
And being able to protect.
You also aren't making jokes that you're armed and dangerous.
No, absolutely.
Or being aggressive towards women.
Yeah, no. Like, I do it out of the sole reason of being able to protect you in a sticky situation because I don't trust everyone out there. Different motives.
Yeah, different. We definitely have different motives than he had. So his friends also said that he drank tons of beers. Also kind of weird. I mean, I guess not, but we'll talk about this. So he could have been tied to antisocial personality disorder. In one of the articles that I found said this. And this is, in fact, just an assumption, so take it with a grain of salt. It was not proved fact, so don't take it too to heart.
Just an opinion. Antisocial
personality disorders is known to have aggression, irritability, anger, boredom, hostility, and lying and manipulative behavior. Ted Bundy. Do you know Ted Bundy, Ty?
Yeah, I know Ted Bundy.
Okay,
Who
good.
doesn't know Ted Bundy?
So Ted Bundy was diagnosed with this disorder as well as John Wayne Gacy and Charles Manson.
Another 3 massive serial killers.
So this is a prevalent disorder that's among serial killers. Those who suffer from this disorder are often impulsive and they have a lack of remorse or guilt, and they are usually physically dependent on drugs or alcohol. That's why I said it was kind of weird that his friends said he always drank beer.
Yeah.
So something also interesting is that when he was first in prison for that rape, he had been put into behavioral therapy, which is a common type of therapy for those that have antisocial personality disorder. His behavior did not change though, and if anything, it only progressed from rape to murder. He also never admitted to any of the crimes and said that all of the evidence that was against him was false, which we often see with serial killers. They have that narcissism of thinking that they're never going to get caught even if they protect their innocence to the day that they die.
Yeah.
So this disorder is one that is very difficult to treat. He could have possibly had this disorder, but again, not a fact, just an assumption I read. To a serial killer, the crimes and murders that they commit are often their greatest accomplishments, they would say. A lot of serial killers will often remember characteristics of their victims and what happened, but not who the actual person was. A lot of them can't actually even name who their victims were. This is because they want to relive their crimes. They want to be able to reminisce on the good times of the crime and the pain and suffering that they made someone endure, which is terrible.
Yeah, that is a dark thing to do.
So oftentimes they also don't remember the location because it's a minor and not important detail to them. The time that this occurred also is meaningless. The thing that they remember the most is how the victim appeared during the crime and how they changed the victim into their crime. This is often why we see them take souvenirs from their crime. It gives them the reminder so that they can relive these good times with their victim, which it's so dark. And we know this is actually not a good thing for anyone involved, and it's an awful, awful thing. So Franklin would take pictures so he could remember his victims and how they looked during this crime, which is diabolical.
Yeah, that is terrible.
We know that serial killers also have no conscience, though, and they are sociopaths oftentimes. They do not feel empathy the way that normal people do, and they will feel pleasure when they inflict pain on others. So instead of feeling the pain that someone else would feel as the victim, they get pleasure from their pain. Very twisted and gross. So the pictures that were his trophies and the way to remember his crimes are why they often will also be able to take breaks from their killings. They'll have that first kill, they'll get a high from this, which satisfies that twisted pleasure, and then they will look at that trophy or that picture and they will relive this and get that same high again. So it's like a psychological thing, right? We noticed that in Franklin's first case that we know of was August 10th of 1985. The next one was almost exactly a year later, as I said before. It was August 12th, 1986. Then we notice his next one is not much after, and it's in January 10th of 1987.
It's about 6 months.
Yeah. So we're noticing it get shorter, right?
Yeah.
The reasoning for this is because serial killers do not get the same high as they did on the first one. The high is not as long, so the need and the urge to kill comes back quicker. We will also notice this with Franklin's case as well. So his fourth victim was barely 3 months after, on April 15th, 1987. Then we have a 6-month gap from April to Halloween night of 1987. Then again, we have barely 4 months between, and we're on January 30th, 1988. Then this leads us to September 11th, 1988, before our big break of 2001. So why do we have this big break? A 14-year break seems unlikely, actually. Yes, we had a year break from his first murder to the second murder, but as we talked about, they get that high, they have that trophy, they look at the trophy, they can feel that high again. But the likeliness of killing 8 women and then going dormant for 14 years is very slim.
Yeah.
Police stated that it's common for serial killers to take breaks between their killings, but this case, they do not think he took a 14-year break. Franklin was also responsible for the death of his friend Thomas Steele, and even though he was not charged for this one, the police also believe that along with this, there was anywhere from 14 to 100 unsolved murders of Jane Does.
That's so sad.
So the likeliness of killing was he probably was killing during these 14 years. He probably just got better at hiding it.
But we don't know of any cases tied back directly to him, right?
No, we do not. We'll talk about where police think they went, though. So the belief behind this is that they found all those pictures at his home that we talked about, right? They had 1,000 pictures at his home.
Yeah.
There was not just the 10 pictures of the victims that we talked about. If he took a picture for his trophies, then why would we have more pictures of women than he killed? This is why police believe that there was more than 10 people killed, and they do not believe he took the 14-year break. He had dozens and dozens of pictures of women, and there was anywhere from 180 photographs of unidentified women in his garage. The investigation of the other women that were linked to Franklin is still ongoing to this day. He maintained his innocence, though, on all charges that were against him. So the only way to solve these crimes, if we find bodies, is if there's DNA that ties him to these crimes. Police also think that if anyone could cover up a body, Franklin could. They think that after the first couple murders, he smartened up and he hid the bodies better. He worked as a sanitation worker for LA, so he had open access to landfills.
Yeah.
The police suspect that he disposed of any numbers of bodies into the landfill completely undetected. Probably didn't take a break. Now that we've discussed the terror that he inflicted on the people of LA, I want to give you some light. Franklin did have 2 survivors, and I'm going to tell you both of their stories. We'll start with the first one that happened before his first murder, but after his rape after the army. So this was believed to have been his first murder attempt, but it did not go through. Laura Moore was 21 in the spring of 1984. She was waiting at a bus stop when a man approached her and offered her some advice. You shouldn't be out here alone. Bad guys will pick you up. Let me take you where you have to go. Maura agreed, not very excited though and a little reluctant. She said she'd searched the car front and back for signs of a weapon before she accepted though. Smart girl. As she drove off, he told her to put on her seatbelt. She refused. She then said that he reached under his seat and grabbed a gun. He had not driven very far and did not drive her to where she had asked to go, but instead drove her to an alley. He then shot her 6 times in the arm, back, and chest. She managed to escape and fell out of the car onto the sidewalk. She then crawled across to the Hoover Street to get help. Someone called the police and paramedics, and as she was getting treated, Franklin drove by slowly. She had tried to tell them what was happening, but she was probably so shell-shocked that she just couldn't get out what she was trying to say.
Yeah.
And she was unable to identify him until she had seen the news in 2010 and realized that the man who had just been arrested and convicted was the man who had attempted to murder her. Our next story is from a survivor named Anitra Washington, who was also supposed to have been a murder victim, but instead she turned into a surviving victim as well. She should have been killed in 1988, but she also survived. Her bullet wounds were a match to those in the cold cases and had a description from the LAPD. She had said that Franklin pulled up next to her in his orange Ford Pinto and offered her a ride. She declined the offer. Franklin then said, and I quote, "That's what's wrong with you black women. People can't be nice to you." She then felt sorry and ultimately accepted this offer. After she was in the car for a while, she suddenly had felt blood coming from her chest. She then realized she'd been shot and asked Franklin why he shot her. He responded that she had disrespected him, and then he pushed her from the vehicle. He left her for dead, but before he did this, he raped her and took her photo. Which, we know he did that with all his victims.
Yeah.
So something that I absolutely love, though, not only is she a badass because she survived, she was shot and left for dead. She looked him in the eyes and said, "If I die, I will haunt you." She might not have gone to haunt him beyond the grave because she survived, but she did seal the deal and put the final nail in his coffin in court.
That's good.
Let's talk about the trial and his hearing. We'll start with the trial. Franklin had maintained his innocence and did not confess to anything. He was tried for the murder of 9 women and a 15-year-old girl and attempted murder of Anitra Washington. The reason he wasn't tried for the other one is because she didn't come in until after he'd been arrested.
Okay.
2 criminalists had testified in court, and they told jurors that they had discovered discarded underwear, a camisole, lingerie, and bras in his LA garage when they investigated and searched the house in July of 2010. They said it was difficult to walk around the garage because there were so many automotive parts and other junk piled high. They showed the jurors several images that depicted evidence in the garage and the storage area. A picture included was a red toolbox with pink underwear on top. And then there was also a yellow tub with several pairs of underwear and other items of clothing in it. This means not only did he take pictures as trophies, but he was also taking either underwear or their clothing. When they then searched his eastern garage, he had 2 garages. They testified that a search of a Nissan pickup in the garage had a black bra and a white plastic bag. In the white plastic bag was even more underwear, a camisole, and a couple pair of shirts. They then found lingerie on the dash of the car. They took a picture and the clothing appeared to have a reddish stain on it. They stated that they had uncovered 800 items of evidence, 10 firearms, and the photographs of the victims. They were also able to recover the .25 caliber Titan pistol, which matched the bullets that were used to shoot and kill his last known victim. All the evidence was stacked against Franklin as it should be. Denisha Peters' mother was one of the dozen family members who spoke in court about his callous acts that had altered her life and how he could be so cruel. Anitra Washington, which one of the survivors that we talked about, she also testified and helped to prove this case. He was shackled in his orange jumpsuit with his back to her. She said she had lived in fear since 1988 and that he didn't deserve forgiveness because he did not show any remorse for his actions. She stated, "You are truly a piece of evil. You're right up there with Manson." The jury found Lonnie Franklin Jr. guilty in all 9 of the women's murders, the teenage girl's murder as well, and the attempted murder of Washington. As the guilty verdict was read, each time he just stayed straight ahead with 0 emotion. As this was read, though, the relief from family members of the victims was super overwhelming. Their justice was finally served, and many of them wept as the verdicts were read. Many of them gathered to pray after and thanked God for the justice and the strength to move on.
Good.
Franklin said that nothing publicly during his trial and did not testify during his own trial, which is usually kind of odd because a lot of your serial killers will testify and be like, "Oh, I didn't do it."
Yeah. try to prove that they're still innocent.
Exactly, but he did not. He showed little emotion or even talked little the whole entire time. When it came down to his sentencing, the judge had noted that there was almost no evidence in favor of sparing his life, and no testimony about good deeds or a troubled upbringing that turned him into who he was. The sentencing was very emotional as many of the family members read their impact statements. Many of them asked Franklin why he chose to attack his own community. One victim's parent said, "The defendant took my daughter, murdered her, put her in a plastic bag, a trash bag, like she was trash. My hope is that he spends the rest of his glory days in his jail cell, which will become his trash bag." 5 of the jurors who had convicted Franklin also came to watch the sentencing. The nephew of Henrietta Wright addressed Franklin directly and said, "You're a cold-hearted dude," to which Franklin only slightly nodded. Mary Alexander, the 18-year-old mom, spoke directly to him and said, "I would like Mr. Franklin to turn around and to face me," to which he slowly turned his head from the judge to her and locked eyes. She asked, "I would like to know why," to which he whispered, in response, something. She repeated her question louder. "Why?" He just whispered again, and someone said later that he muttered, "I didn't do it." She continued, "I know she didn't hurt you." Franklin's face softened, and he nodded. She also continued, "I thought a lot about forgiveness, but this concept was difficult for me to grapple with. I'm still battling that." Franklin nodded again and then turned back to the judge. This was the most he'd given to anyone, though, during the trial or the sentencing. But still was not much. The judge, Kathleen Kennedy, also said, and I will quote what she said, "I cannot think of anyone I've encountered in all my years in the criminal justice system that has committed the monstrous crimes that you have." She stated that the death sentence was not for vengeance, but for justice. And she said, "You shall suffer the death penalty." Franklin, even during his sentencing of the death penalty, did not flinch and just looked forward. However, Franklin would not have to live to face this sentence. Franklin was on death row and died at age 67 on March 28, 2020 in the San Quentin State Prison. He was found unresponsive in a single cell at 7:20 p.m. Medical assistance was applied and an ambulance was summoned. He was pronounced dead at 7:43 p.m. He had an autopsy done and no signs of trauma were detected, so they concluded he had died of old age. I don't know how I feel about this. Yes, he did his time until death, but I don't know. He barely served 4 years. That's not even close to the 10 lives that he took away that are known, and might more likely more than 10 lives that he took. And he barely lived 4 years in prison.
Yeah.
Any closing thoughts, Ty?
No, I mean, he was just a monster. Did terrible, terrible things to women, to people in his community. But justice was served eventually. I mean, He did get caught, and he did get put in a prison, and he died in a prison.
It's true.
So
it's still so hard because 4 years is just not very long to serve in prison. He's still got to live out majority of his life.
No, absolutely, I agree with you. But at the end of the day, like, he got caught.
Yeah. No,
for his terrible acts, and he got put in prison. So, I mean, it would have been a lot better if they would have caught him in the 1980s.
Yes,
his first murders, but the cases went cold until they found the correlation between all of them.
He still ended up getting put in jail and was told he had the death penalty, which I'm sure was probably even still hard, but
yeah.
And he died in prison. All right, guys, thank you so much for listening today. I hope that we can all think about these victims today. There were many of them, and they all deserve to be remembered. I do not want to end with his name because he does not deserve that final recognition. So to finish, I'll read all of our victims one more time because this was their life that was ended and they deserve to be the final names read. And I want us to remember them today. Deborah Jackson, Henrietta Wright, Barbara Ware, Bernita Sparks, Mary Lowe, Latricia Jefferson, Alicia Alexander, Princess Bartholomew Eggs, Valeria McCorbury, Janicia Peters, Laura Moore, Anitra Washington, and the others that were not identified. These names are not just names, they're a real story. Don't take life for granted and love those next to you. This was a super heavy episode. I know for me it felt really heavy while I was doing the research, and I just felt so much actual empathy for those victims and their families, and I can't imagine having to go through that. Take care of yourselves after this episode, and thank you for listening. We will see you next week with another episode and our new theme of the month. Be safe, and don't forget, as me and Ty like to say,
till death do us part.